Setting by Shobha, jacket designed by Janaki. Janaki and Shobha are Australians or Americans, I don't know. There is one more bundle, I don't know what it is. So occasionally it is good to be taken by surprise also. I myself don't know what I am releasing. Anyhow, as the Purusha Sukta says, this is also Lord Narayana himself. Harireva Jagat, Jagadeva Hari. Everything in this world is a manifestation of Lord Narayana. Charachara sarvasvam, stavaram lingamam chaiva, yatkinchit satarataram, Purushamevedam sarvam, yad bhutam yacha bhavyam. Here is another super production. I don't mind saying that. And congratulations must go to Sri N.V. Karthikeyan Swami, who has worked day and night for this, and all his colleagues, because this was printed right here under your nose in Ashram Press, and therefore he must have had a wholehearted and enthusiastic cooperation of all the people associated with the press. This is the centenary celebration special souvenir. Very happy to release it. Very happy to release it. The Master, his mission and his works, Swami Shivananda Birth Centenary Commemoration Volume. So this is Putti, and one copy may be signed by Dr. Putti. Yes, Karthikeyan ji, please come give darshan. He is the main architect of this wonderful volume. Now I understand why I did not give this mala away somewhere. Now I understand. It is Hindi का हमने release कर लिया है. God bless you. You can get signature of all the people now. And Ramaraj. There is also a bumper souvenir Hindi running into nearly 800 pages, and that is brought out by the Hindi department and under the aegis blessing of Sri Swami Chandrasekharaj Maharaj, and actively worked for by Ramarajyam and Upadhyaya, Ramesh Upadhyaya. Under Vanubhuji got experience. He is author of that work. You can take his signature from others. Hari Om. What is this? Admit your faults daily before your preceptor or teacher. Then alone you will find strength to rise above worldly weakness. Walk like walking on the razor's blade. The spiritual path is difficult. Spiritual life is a continuous struggle, not in the sense of struggle with external forces of evil, but in the sense of an inner struggle against one's own lower nature. Spiritual life, demands purity and selfless service are associated with the name of Hinduism. Hindu Dharma is a way of life itself.
नारायणाय ओम नमो 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 नारायणाय Dr. Kshetrapal, Sri
यत्पुरुषं यतनुः व्यकल्पयन् मुखं विवक्षतो बाहो पादावुचेने ब्राह्मणोऽस्य मुखमासीत् बाहोरारण्यकृतः ओरो नदस्य यद्वैश्यः पद्भ्यागं शूद्रो अजायत चन्द्रमा मनसो जातः यक्षो सूर्यो अजायतः त्र्यम्बकं यजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनम् उर्वारुकम्यवन्दनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयम् छन्दोभ्योऽजमृतात्कं बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया शृणोतु अमृतस्य देवकारिणो भूयासम् शरीरं मे विदर्शनम् जह्वा मे मधुमत्तः कर्णाभ्यां भूरि विश्रुवम् ब्रह्मणः कोशो निवेदयामि हितः श्रुतं मे गोपायान्तिः ॐ आप्यायन्तु ममाङ्गानि वाक्प्राणचक्षुश्रोत्रम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ईश्वरेणं सर्वभूतानां कापिमोहत्वयेष्यम् गन्धं धारयामि गन्धस्योपरि कुङ्कुमं समर्पयामि कल्याणगुणसम्पूर्णाय नमः ॐ सदाशिवपरायणाय नमः ॐ कल्पनारहिताय नमः ॐ वीर्याय नमः ॐ भगवद्गानलोलुपाय नमः श्री सद्गुरु शिवानन्द स्वामिने नमः ॐ नमो भगवते शिवानन्दाय 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 ॐ नमो भगवते शिवानमो भगवते शिवानन्दाय ॐ नमो 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 भगवते शिवानन्दाय
त्रय मध्यमाम् अस्मद्गुरुपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। मङ्गलं गुरुदेवाय महनीय गुणात्मने सर्वलोकशरण्याय श्री साधुरूपाय मंगलम। ओम श्री शिवानंदाय नमः। ओम श्री सद्गुरु परमात्मने नमः। Radiant divinities, beloved and blessed children of the divine. दिव्य जीवन का गाड़ी में, दिव्य जीवन का गाड़ी में दिव्य धाम जाएंगे, दिव्य धाम जाएंगे, दिव्य धाम जाएंगे,
दिव्य धाम जाएंगे,
दिव्य जीवन की गाड़ी में,
दिव्य जीवन की गाड़ी में
दिव्य धाम जाएंगे,
दिव्य धाम जाएंगे।
चेकिंग होगा रास्ते में,
चेकिंग होगा रास्ते में,
शिवानंद टिकट दिखाएंगे,
शिवानंद टिकट दिखाएंगे।
चेकिंग होगा रास्ते में,
चेकिंग होगा रास्ते में,
शिवानंद टिकट दिखाएंगे,
शिवानंद टिकट दिखाएंगे।
दिव्य जीवन की गाड़ी में,
दिव्य जीवन की गाड़ी में
दिव्य धाम जाएंगे,
दिव्य धाम जाएंगे।
चेकिंग होगा रास्ते में,
चेकिंग होगा रास्ते में,
शिवानंद टिकट दिखाएंगे,
शिवानंद टिकट दिखाएंगे।
ये शिवानंद टिकट क्या है? देखिए, यही कहना है। आप सोचते हैं शताब्दी समारोह समाप्त हुआ, लेकिन मैं कहता हूं हमारे कार्यक्रम आज अब प्रारंभ हुआ है। समाप्त नहीं हुआ है, प्रारंभ हुआ है। और वो प्रारंभ क्या है? गुरु महाराज के चरण से ज्ञान गंगा जो निकसी है, तो उस धारा में हम सब अपना जीवन नौका को बहाना है और सच्चिदानंद सागर जाकर के पाना है। ये कार्य आज से प्रारंभ होता है, क्योंकि जो भी संत है, जो भी महापुरुष है, जो भी अवतार पुरुष है, आकर के अपना प्रेरणाप्रद स्फूर्तिदायक तो ज्ञान उपदेश दे करके जाता है, तब भी थोड़े समय के बाद मानव स्वभाव ऐसा है, ढीला पड़ जाता है। और पुर्जा खसने के लिए, पुर्जा खसने के लिए ऐसा समारोह, ऐसा वक्त। इसलिए नाउ दिस शताब्दी सेंटिनरी हैज कमेंस्ड our rededication to divine life. Our rededication, it has commenced, it is not concluded. Today, at this moment, with this Paduka Puja, when you have shown outer reverence by offering flowers and abhishek and worship and arati to Gurudev, our real inner heartfelt reverence and worshipfulness to him will only be proved to be genuine and truthful and full by our making ourselves living, dynamic embodiments and personifications of his divine life. And that divine life, that way of life, what is that way of life which he came to give to us? It is a life सत्यव्रत की जीवन, झूठ को त्याग करके सत्यव्रत को अपना करके काया वाचा मनसा सत्यशील बन करके जीवन करना, ये दिव्य जीवन है। और क्रोध और द्वेष रहित क्षमाशील और प्रेममय जीवन, किसी को हानि नहीं करना, अपने स्वप्न में भी, अपने विचार में भी। वाणी और कार्य की तो बात ही रह गया, क्या बात है। वाणी में, व्यवहार में तो किसी को हानि करना ही नहीं है, लेकिन स्वप्न में, विचार में भी किसी का हानि नहीं सोचना, सबका भला सोचना। ये दिव्य जीवन है, ये उनका दिखाया हुआ रास्ता है। और काया वाचा मनता पवित्रता, पवित्रता, प्यूरिटी इन थॉट, वर्ड एंड डीड, दैट इज द वे ही हैज शोन इट टू अस टू फॉलो, एंड दैट वे vigorously dedicating ourselves to that way of truthfulness, compassion and kindness and universal love, purity will commence anew, afresh from today, and we rededicate ourselves to selflessness of heart and motiveless service unto all, including animals, insects and plants and fellow beings, of course, and unfailing devotion at the feet of God, love for all mankind, devotion at the feet of God, and living to worship God in everything that we do. And not satisfied by merely worshipping as we are, not satisfied by merely worshipping as we are, but keenly aspiring, hungering to be one with him, attain union with him, and become what he is, fully divine, through daily concentrated, one-pointed meditation, and ceaselessly discriminating between the non-eternal and the eternal, the passing and the permanent, so that we may not be caught in the net of the impermanent, the non-eternal appearances. Through discrimination, through vivek, vichar, analysis and investigation, ceaselessly living in order to attain self-realization. This is the divine way that he has taught. Truthfulness, kindness and compassion, purity in thought, word and deed, pervasive purity in our life, and unremitting selfless service, devout worship of the divine, and ceaseless aspiration to attain union with him through daily unfailing concentrated meditation, and bewailing of the Mayaik world through inquiry, discrimination, analysis and investigation, so that we reject the outer names and forms, no matter how alluring, how attracting they may be, knowing them to be hollow and false, and go straight like an arrow shot from the bow to that great reality, the self, which pervades everywhere and indwells all. It is to this life, this divine life which is lived and taught to us, that we should rededicate ourselves afresh, anew, today, and commence vigorously living that divine way. This commencement I recommend to each and every one of you, and thank you. God bless you. संपूर्णता के लिए जो अत्यंत परिश्रम करते हुए स्वामी शिवानंद शताब्दी समारोह समिति के महामंत्री कहते हैं, जनरल सेक्रेटरी, महामंत्री के रूप में, महासचिव के रूप में हमारे परम पूज्य और माननीय डॉक्टर कुट्टी माता जी, जो डिवाइन लाइफ सोसाइटी के एक ट्रस्टी भी हैं, डॉक्टर कुट्टी माता जी जनरल सेक्रेटरी ऑफ द स्वामी शिवानंदा सेंटिनरी सेलिब्रेशंस कमेटी के जनरल सेक्रेटरी होते हुए रात दिन ये बोझा उठा करके अपना परिश्रम के द्वारा ये संपूर्णता को प्राप्त हुई है। इसलिए मैं सानुरोध करबद्ध प्रार्थना करूंगा कुट्टी माता जी के लिए, वो 2-4 मिनट के लिए स्टेज में आकर के अपना दर्शन जनता जनार्दन को प्रदान करें।
Swami Shivananda lived to serve mankind, and for this purpose he established the Divine Life Society. From this sacred Samadhi shrine, he continues to serve, inspire and guide thousands of seekers all over the world. The centenary celebration was a grand success due to his grace. This production is offered at his feet as Shraddhanjali. Jai Shivananda.
नीलराजो महारण्ये तपस्वी शरणं परम् शङ्करश्वसुरो नाम्ना हिमवानिति विश्रुतः महाप्रस्रवणोपेतो बहुकन्दरनिर्भरः अस्योत्तरस्यां दिशि देवतात्मा हिमालयो नाम नगाधिराजः पूर्वापरौ तोयनिधीरगायः स्थितः पृथिव्या इव मानदण्डः धातोत्तला वरिमानवद्यो न्यासो वरेण्य कुशलप्रयोगः क्षणे क्षणे नूतनसान्दधानो हिमालयोऽसौ जयतान्नवेशः आमेखलम् सञ्चरताङ्घनानाम् छायामभस्तान्गतान्निषेव्य उद्वेजिता वृष्टिभिराश्रयन्ते शृङ्गान्यस्यातपवन्ति सिद्धाः
The Himalayas is the call of the spirit. There is something in the very atmosphere here that thrills. From time immemorial, from the days of Vyas and Vashisht to the present, poets, painters, artists and spiritual seekers from both east and west have responded to this call of the Himalayas. Numerous spiritual seekers have sought shelter in the solitude of these mountains. One such was Swami Shivananda. Who was Shivananda?
Gurudev Swami Shivananda Maharaj was a great lover of mankind. He was a great friend of humanity. And he was a great Desha-premi and a premi of Bharatiya Sanskriti. So his main message to modern mankind today in this disturbed 20th century was the message of our ancient darshan. That which said, man, essentially you are divine. You are not merely a human earth creature. You have got within you potential for wonderful divinity, qualities full of mercy and kindness and purity and knowledge and parobakar bhav and wisdom, satyam jnanam anandam brahma. And therefore Life is a rare chance given to you in order to awaken this hidden and slumbering divinity within you and make your life a glorious, resplendent manifestation of this inner, hidden, divine higher self of yours. He used to say,
"Thou art divine. Live up to it. Feel and realize thy divine nature. Thou art the master of your destiny. Do not be discouraged when sorrows, difficulties and tribulations manifest in the daily battle of life. Draw courage and spiritual strength from within. There is a vast inexhaustible magazine of power and knowledge within. Learn the ways to tap the source. Dive deep within. Sink down. Plunge in the sacred waters of immortality. The holy Triveni within. You will be quite refreshed, renovated and vivified when you go to the divine source and realize, I am the immortal self or Atman. Hey Soumya, dear immortal self, be bold, be cheerful, though you are down and out, though you have nothing to eat, though you are clad in rags. The essential nature is such Brahman, existence absolute, knowledge absolute and bliss absolute. This outer cloak, this mortal physical shape, is an illusory Maya production. Smile, whistle, laugh, jump, dance in joy and ecstasy. Sing Om Om Om, Ram Ram Ram, Sham Sham Sham. Shivoham, Shivoham, Shivoham. Soham, Soham, Soham. Come out of this cage of flesh. Thou art not this perishable body. Thou art the immortal self Atman. Thou art sexless Atman. Thou art the son of king of kings, an emperor of emperors, Brahma the Upanishads, the Atman who dwells in the chambers of your heart. Hriday Guha. Act as such, feel as such, claim your birthright now from this very second. Feel as such, recognize, realize, not from tomorrow or the day after, but right now from this very second. Tattvamasi, thou art that was Naranjan, thou art immortal self or Atman.
100 years ago, a boy was born in the far south of India in Pattamade, a small village set in the midst of green paddy fields and lush plantain groves. The family astrologer predicted that a child born under the star Bharani would rule the Dharani. The family in which the child was born traced its lineage to Appaya Dikshitar, the famous saint scholar of the 16th century. The parents, Vengu Iyer and Parvati Ammal, named him Kuppuswamy. Kuppuswamy studied in Pattamade and Ettayapuram, where his father was employed in the palace. Even as a boy, Kuppuswamy displayed spiritual tendencies. From school, Kuppuswamy went to the SPG College in Tiruchirappalli. Even at that age, he displayed a desire to help. This led him to the Tanjore Medical College. Dr. Kuppuswamy was a handsome youth. Soon he started a health magazine called Ambrosia, but after 4 years sailed to Malaya in search of greener pasture. In Malaya, Kuppuswamy worked as a doctor in the rubber estates and later in Johor Bahru. Spiritual tendencies which were latent in him even in his childhood now became more manifest. A stage came in his thinking when he was possessed by an irrepressible urge to find the truth of things, to find the meaning behind life. At the height of his career and material affluence, he gave up his job and left the shores of Malaya in quest of truth. Kuppuswamy now headed straight for Kashi with the one thought in his mind: I must realize God now. In Kashi, he poured his heart out to Lord Vishnu'S, the Lord of the universe. Kupuswami shivered in the North Indian winter, and the Good Samaritan gave him a blanket and bought him a ticket to Pandharpur. At Pandharpur, the doctor distributed the few coins he had to the poor and surrendered himself totally to the mercy of the Lord. He became a parivrajaka, a wandering mendicant. Kupuswami wandered thus in the scorching heat of the Maharashtra countryside and in the Vindhyas. Months passed before God guided him to Rishikesh, where one Swami Vishwananda initiated him into sannyas. Dr. Kupuswami now became Swami Shivananda Saraswati. It was on the 1st of June 1924. Kupuswami was 36 then. He had taken the spiritual plunge, never to look back again. Rishikesh is a small township of anchorites and recluses, silent hermits and meditative monks. A little distance from here spreads the valley of Munikireti, where flows the sacred Ganga. On the opposite side is located the sprawling Swargashram, to which place Swami Shivananda moved not long after his initiation into sannyas. Here he was horrified to notice the condition of the sadhus nearby. Most of them were illiterate, undernourished and diseased. They were leading aimless lives. Shivananda tried to serve them, tried to educate them, give them a direction in their lives. Side by side with this seva, Swami Shivananda kept up his personal sadhana. He lived every moment to spiritual purpose. He roamed in the jungle, singing and chanting the Lord's names, contemplating on the mystery of God and His creation. The Swargashram authorities gave Swamiji a kutir to stay in and provided him bhiksha. He loved the Ganga and sat on its bank gazing into the eternal flow of the limpid waters. Ganga nourished him. Ganga comforted him. Ganga taught him the truths of the Upanishads. In the afternoon, the young monk crossed the river by boat and came down to the Ramashram library on the right bank of the river and read voraciously, taking notes all the time. In the flood season, when the boats stopped plying, Shivananda walked the long distance via the Lakshman Jhula bridge, but he never once missed his reading. In between, in the company of fellow Mahatmas, Swamiji went on pilgrimage to many holy places, including Kailas Mansarovar.
Ramadoni lagi, Gopal doni lagi, kaise chutiye, Ramadoni lagi, Gopal doni lagi.
I love the Ganga and the Himalayas. Ganga is my mother divine. The Himalayas is my father divine. They inspire and guide me, says the master, who more than anyone else was responsible for making Rishikesh and yoga familiar to the 4 continents.
Ramadoni lagi, Gopal doni lagi, kaise chutiye, Ramadoni lagi.
In those meditations, Swamiji churned his own soul. Experiences were many. And one day, someday, thought expired into experience, and truth became manifest. Visitors to Shivananda's Swargashram Kutir now began to increase in number, and Swamiji moved to the right bank of the river along with a few disciples. An ashram slowly grew round him. To give it shape and to serve the public in a more methodical manner, Swami Shivananda founded the Divine Life Society in 1936. Today, half a century later, the society has branches almost all over the world, spreading Swami Shivananda's gospel of selfless service, and cosmic love. Throughout the 30s, Shivananda toured various places in India, spreading Kirtan Bhakti, giving spiritual discourses and training people in Yogasana and Pranayama. He sang and danced his way into the hearts of millions of bhaktas. He organized Sankirtan Sammelans, Akhanda Kirtan, Lorry Kirtan, Boat Kirtan, Kirtan on elephant back. Swamiji's contribution to the revival of the Sankirtan movement in India was phenomenal. The temple is the heart of the institution. The presiding deity here is Lord Vishwanath. The beautiful Shiva Lingam seems to proclaim that God is one. Right behind is Murali Manohar, exquisitely carved in black stone. Krishna was Shivananda's Ishta Devata. Devi, whom Shivananda loved to call Parashakti Maharani, and last but not least, Ganesh. All the idols here was consecrated by the master himself, and traditional worship is conducted thrice daily. The well-stocked library is one of the service wings of the Divine Life Society. By personal experience during his days of tapasya, Swamiji found that the spiritual seeker should be freed from the bother of begging for food, good books, and medical aid. When he founded the Divine Life Society, he made sure that he started a good library. The printing press is the nerve center of Shivananda's mission. If enough money does not flow in, I will shut down the kitchen and take bhiksha outside, but the press must go on. That was Swamiji's mission. Dissemination of spiritual knowledge was a passion with him. It cut at ignorance, the root of human misery. Thanks to Shivananda, the highest Vedic knowledge is today available in the simplest language to everyone, everywhere. The Yoga Vedanta Forest Academy is a training wing of the society. Regular classes are held here and training is given the theory and practice of yoga and Vedanta. Both resident monks and visiting professors conduct the classes, and emphasis is laid on the integrated development of body, mind and soul. Run on the lines of the ancient Gurukula, the teachers here train students as much by personal example as by precept. It was not unusual for Swami Shivananda, a chancellor of the academy, to supervise the yoga classes personally. Swamiji believed that sound health was imperative for sadhana. The Shivananda Charitable Hospital, started as a dispensary in a humble way by Swamiji, has expanded over the years. Medical camps by visiting specialists is a normal feature here. The hospital, like the other departments of the institution, is the outcome of Shivananda's thirst to serve people. Manned by qualified doctors, headed by Dr. Devaki Kuti, it is a boon to the entire neighborhood. Says the master,
Serve the humanity with Atma Bhav. Serve the poor. Serve the sick with Narayana Bhav. Serve the society. Serve the country. Selfless service is highest yoga. Samadhi will come by itself without any effort for one who is solely absorbed in service when his heart is purified. Service is worship of the Lord. Never forget this.
The society runs 3 leper colonies. The lepers were as dear to Swami Shivananda as the Pandit and the priest. Are not their flesh and blood the same as our own? Does not the Lord pervade the lepers also? And the master went on to ask one stunning question. What is the caste of the Lord? Can anyone answer that? In the dining hall or Annakshetra, hundreds of resident inmates, visitors, sadhus and the poor are fed thrice a day round the year. Swamiji advises spiritual aspirants to plunge into selfless service. Service requires energy. Food supplies that energy.
To do great work, a person also should be great in himself. Great achievements are the outcome of a great being. This is something which an enthusiast in the field of social activity may overlook, forgetting the essentials of life, namely the success of any adventure depends upon the extent one is in a state of at-one-ment with the permanent values of life. This is the meditational background, the spiritual foundation of this humanitarian institution, the Divine Life Society, which is an expanded form of the vast vision of Swami Shivananda, a Superman in himself.
There is something dearer than wealth. There is something dearer than your wife. There is something dearer than your children. There is something dearer than your life itself. That dearest something is thy own self, Atma, inner ruler, Antaryamin, immortal, Amritam. This immortal self can be realized by incessant practice of meditation.
In 1950, Swami Shivananda set out on a 2-month tour of India and Ceylon to preach and teach, to serve and love, to console, comfort and cheer, to bring new hope into the lives of millions. In his own words, he bathed and bathed again in the ocean of the multitude's devotion to the Lord. Shivananda's special interest in the younger generation made him visit 8 universities and 25 other educational institutions during his brief tour of 2 months. Here is the small kutir where lived Swami Shivananda for well nigh 30 years. Here is Swamiji's writing desk. He wrote religiously at a fixed time every day. Swamiji's coat, clothes, shoes. Shivananda had hardly any possession to call his own. The puja room. In one of his poems, the master reveals indirectly that Lord Krishna had given him darshan and commanded him to spread kirtan bhakti, which of course he carried out most ably. Swami Shivananda merged with the cosmic in 1963. The holy Samadhi shrine is where his mortal frame is interred. The place is spiritually vibrant and is holy beyond compare. It serves as a focal point for the devotees to concentrate upon. Man-made barriers of caste and creed, language and religion, color and sex just don't exist here. Here, all are equal. All are children of the Lord. They sit as one in the satsang. They pray as one in the temple. There is total harmony, total unity, total freedom. The spirit of Shivananda lives on still.
There are some popular misconceptions about the life spiritual. One is that religion is for retired people. Swami Sivananda says, no. Youth is the period for yoga abhyas. He stresses physical fitness. He says the body is the chariot of the soul. Keep it strong and healthy and do the maximum service to the world. Service is worship. Some people say, we are householders. What can we do? Wrong again. Divine life is as much for the man with wife and children as for the sannyasi. In his view, marriage is a sacrament and grihasthasrama is a strict life of selfless service, of dharma, pure and simple, and all that is good and all that is helpful to humanity. The life of an ideal householder is as difficult as the life of an ideal sannyasi. Both are conducive to mukti. Then there is this last idea that spiritual life and worldly life are two separate things, far from the truth. Swamiji Maharaj says that man is spirit residing in the body and his life is
your body, your own home. Melt and destroy all barriers that separate man from man. Idea of superiority is ignorance or delusion. Ishavasyam sarvam. Develop Vishwaprem, all embracing, all inclusive love. Unite with all. Separation is death. Unity is eternal life. The whole world is Vishwavrindavan. Feel that this body is a moving temple of God. Wherever you are, whether at home, office, know you are in the temple of God. Every work is an offering unto the Lord. Feel that all beings are images of God. Transmute every work into yoga or an offering unto the Lord. Have akarta, sakshi bhav if you are a student of Vedanta. Have nirvita bhav if you are an aspirant in the path of bhakti. Feel that God works through your hands, that one power works through all hands, sees through all eyes, hears through all ears. You will become a changed being. You will have a new angle of vision. You will enjoy the highest peace and bliss.
If there is any one impact, one indelible impression, which my nearly 20 years of constant close association with him has left in my heart regarding Swami Shivananda Maharaj, my beloved Guru, it is that I saw in him, in the entire range of my life and its experience, I saw in him an individual who was absolutely devoid of the least vestige or trace of selfishness. His whole personality was one mass of selfless desire to make other people happy. Day and night, with every breath, with every action, every moment of his life, he lived only for one thing. He was always thinking how I can make others happy, how I can make people get happiness, go beyond sorrow, find their own happiness, and in what way. As long as I live, every day I can fill the day with such actions that can benefit humanity around me. He lived for it. He had not the least sense of selfishness. He never had the wildest, even the wildest dreams. He never could think, what can I have or what can I get? His one idea was, what can I do? What can I bring to people? What can I do to make people happy? That is something very extraordinary, rare I have seen in him. And that is something which will live with me as long as I am alive.
Swami Shivananda comes to us with the eternal message of the freedom of the spirit. It was his thesis that the different religions do not contradict, but supplement one another. Swamiji's concept of Hinduism was something very lofty. This holy man was not narrow or bigoted. The divine life propounded by the Swami has no creed of its own, but it represents the essence of all creeds. Shivananda was quite the antithesis of the general conception of sagehood and sannyas. He was recluse and reformer, philosopher and humanitarian. He was a beautiful synthesis of the quiet wisdom of the East and the active dynamism of the West. It is hard to categorize him. All creeds. Shivananda was quite the antithesis of the general conception of sagehood and sannyas. He was recluse and reformer, philosopher and humanitarian. He was a beautiful synthesis of the quiet wisdom of the East and the active dynamism of the West. It is hard to categorize him. All that can be said is, he was a universal man with a universal vision.
India, a holy land that has produced innumerable godmen. The Himalayas, the spiritual home of saints and sages from ancient times to the present. The holy Ganga and lofty Himalayas have given spiritual solace to countless seekers from time immemorial. Engaging in contemplation on the holy banks of the river Ganga in the Himalayas, great yogis, rishis, and maunis have attained divine communion. The entire countryside has been trodden by men who have soaked in God experience, men for whom God was the sole reality permeating this earth. Such a one was Shivananda. The entire teaching of Swami Shivananda can be summarized by 6 instructions. Serve, love, give, purify, meditate, realize. This is what Swami Shivananda himself practiced and taught to his disciples. He called this integral yoga, or the yoga of synthesis. It is the essence of all teachings, of all saints and sages, of all yoga and Vedanta, and of all religions. He was born far from his ashram in the north, on September 8, 1887, the 3rd son of a devout South Indian couple from Padmavati. His parents named him Kupaswami. He was a well-built youth, and his personality was radiant and fired with an inexplicable zeal and enthusiasm. He had little difficulty choosing medicine as a profession and excelled in his efforts, and soon became Dr. Kupaswami. He practiced medicine for a time in Madras. His love for service, however, attracted him to Malaya, where conditions of the workers in the rubber plantations were nothing short of pathetic. He went to Malaya in 1913 and served as a doctor there. In Malaya, he loved the sick, was compassionate to the suffering, and charitable to those in need. In his autobiography, Shivananda wrote, "This kind of selfless service gave me the purification of heart and mind, and led me to the spiritual path." It was in Malaya that a sudden transformation took place in Dr. Kupaswami. He had witnessed that despite his efforts and attentive care, he could not ebb the flow of intense suffering and misery. He saw that people everywhere were steeped in ignorance, and realized this ignorance to be the root cause of all suffering here. He immediately resigned his job, returned to India, visited a few holy places, and eventually came to Rishikesh, the area known as the Uttarakhand. Although all of India is holy, the Uttarakhand is considered one of the most sacred of places. From ancient times, men seeking God would come to this area in order to perform austerities. Their divine wisdom permeates the very air of the Uttarakhand. His wanderings as a mendicant not only brought him to this area, but to the spot where the Shivananda ashram was eventually to be situated, the holy place of the Munakareti. It was given the name as the spot where India's great sages of old had come to sit on the river's sandbanks. Sages such as Vyasa, Vashishta, and Narada came here. They came to do spiritual practices and to sit in meditation. Even today, the thought currents of these great sages continues to vibrate in the ether of this area and inspire and guide those who practice meditation here. Even casual observers will be subtly influenced and feel a strange peace, power, and calm that emanates in the surrounding atmosphere. And so, to this holy place, he came. On the first day of June, 1924, he was initiated into the holy order of sannyasa by Swami Vishwananda Saraswati, and henceforward became known as Swami Shivananda Saraswati. After his initiation into sannyasa, he did intense penance. Sometimes he would go into the jungle for days at a time and meditate there. He eventually moved to a small cottage in Swag Ashram. While at Swag Ashram, he would serve the sick and elderly monks. He would observe their lives and learn many useful lessons. He found that many had neglected certain aspects of their personality, and as yogis had become lopsided in their development. He found them either too emotional or too intellectual. He saw also that many had paid too much attention to the body, or else totally neglected their own health and spiritual aspirations due to unwanted ambitions. He decided to utilize every moment in service, study, and sadhana for the harmonious evolution of the body, mind, and soul. Service was practiced for the purification of the heart and the removal of egoism. Study of the scriptures in order to have both an understanding of the goal and the conviction in the efficacy of one's practices, and sadhana for the attainment of the goal. He practiced a few simple asanas and also some pranayama for the maintenance of good health. Thus he practiced what he later on called the yoga of synthesis, or integral yoga. He would often take the ferry boat across the river. On the opposite shore, he would read books from the Ram Ashram library, after which he would go off into the jungle to meditate. During this time, Shivananda had visions of many ancient rishis, Vyasa, Vashishta, and others. Then, one day in 1930, on the spot where his temple now stands, he had illumination and vision of Lord Krishna. He heard a voice which said, "Shiva, I have filled the cup of your life with the nectar of the divine name. Go and share it with all." His entire personality became charged with divinity, and his personal magnetism began to attract devotees and disciples. He had no choice but to leave his small kutir at the Swag ashram. In 1934, he crossed to the other side of the river Ganga with his first handful of disciples to humbly live among some abandoned and dilapidated cowsheds, marking the humble beginnings of the Shivananda ashram. Gradually over time, stories began to circulate all over India about a great yogi living in the Himalayas. And so they came. Sadhus, teachers, monks, and yogis. All waited patiently to have his blessings and his darshan. His disciples sat at his feet, studied and practiced his yoga of synthesis. Without his intending to do so, his name had spread far and wide, even to the Western world, where his disciples had opened yoga centers to further the understanding of yoga in the West. He came to be known as the sage of practical wisdom. He was not only regarded as a great sage and yogi, but as a saint, one of the spiritual giants of India. And so they came by the multitudes. They came to be with him, to be in his presence. They would garland him and worship him as God. He would adapt and adjust and accommodate their demands. Despite his failing health, his high spirits would never falter. Up until the last days, he would adapt, adjust, and accommodate all. Men and women of all religions came to see him. He outstretched his arms to them and made them all feel that they had come home. Although he has departed, his ashram remains a virtual beehive of activities. Its doors open to pilgrims and seekers throughout the year. There are a large number of residents and visitors. A typical lunch at the ashram dining hall must be given in several seatings, with an average of 500 mouths to feed daily. Many have stayed on after the master's departure to carry on his work and to practice his instructions. So many activities go on at the Shivananda ashram in any one day that the new arrival will be unaware of most of them. On this particular day, a Mr. Michael has arrived from Malaya. He's come to the ashram for the first time. He is directed into the office of Kartikayan Swami, a resident of the ashram since the age of 19, and secretary to Swami Krishnananda, the secretary of the Divine Life Society. Mr. Michael will have the good fortune of being given a special guided tour. Introductions are exchanged. Kartikayan accepts generously and becomes Mr. Michael's tour guide. They are to spend much of the afternoon discussing the life of Swami Shivananda. Finally, they are ready to begin their tour of the ashram. They will begin with the Vishnu'S Mandir, the temple that stands on the site where Swami Shivananda received illumination and vision of Sri Krishna. Inside are statues of splendorous deities. Consecrated in 1943, all the deities were installed by the Master's own hands. Here the Pujari is chanting Veda mantras for the worship of Lord Shiva. The mantras are very powerful and effective if chanted with understanding of import and with inner attunement. The all-pervading divinity is invoked and worshipped through symbols. Puja is an aid to withdraw the dissipated rays of the mind and fix it on a single object. Then the concentrated mind is easily tuned inward into the heart, which is the place of communion with the universal reality. Puja is thus done for purification of heart, concentration of mind, and for reception of divine grace. Their next stop along the way is a class in the study of Hatha Yoga. This young monk is instructing students from the West as well as from the East in the ancient science of Hatha Yoga. In the Hatha Yoga class, students are trained in asanas and pranayama, as well as in meditation. The master believed in an integral development of the whole personality. That naturally includes a healthy body. However, asanas are not merely exercises in physical culture. Asanas and pranayama are essential aids to meditation and spiritual growth. One of the oldest buildings in the ashram is the Bhajan Hall, which was opened in April of 1942. All the spiritual activities, including morning meditation, the Hatha Yoga classes, the forenoon and afternoon lectures, and the evening satsang gatherings, all used to be conducted here. Swami Shivananda was always the first to arrive for every occasion. Here in the Bhajan Hall, the Maha Mantra is repeated continuously. It is repeated 24 hours a day, with each monk sitting and repeating it for 2 hours at a time. The Maha Mantra is considered to be extremely powerful. It is chanted for the well-being of all, everywhere. At the suggestion of Swami Shivananda, it has been repeated 24 hours a day, each and every day of the year, since 1943. Shivananda was a great devotee of the Maha Mantra himself. He would sing it and go into ecstasy, making the listeners forget themselves in divine bliss. Years ago, a dramatic event happened in the Bhajan Hall. It was the 8th of January, 1950. The evening satsanga was in progress, and the oil lamps were turned low onto a dim flame, during which time a man entered the hall with an axe and attacked the master. The first blow missed entirely. The second blow grazed his thick turban. Monks around rushed to get hold of the assailant. The master ordered that no harm should be done to him. He continued the satsanga as if nothing had happened. Then, when it was over, instead of punishing the assailant, he did puja and worshipped him as God. He brought the man flowers, prepared a large feast, presented him with books, japa beads, even initiated him into the path of yoga. He told the man that if he needed any help, to please write to him. Turning to his disciples, the master said, "God has saved me because more service is to be done through this body." a sign gives information about the Om Namona Royanoya peace chant, held every morning. They will visit it the following day. On their way to visit the printing press, they pass the Shivananda pillar, which contains the life and teachings of Swami Shivananda, as well as the essential teachings of all the religions of the world. On this side of the pillar is found a brief account of the major episodes in the life of Swami Shivananda. On the base of the pillar are found Sanskrit mantras, the great utterances which reveal the highest Vedantic truth. They are found most useful in the practice of meditation. On this side, the 20 instructions of Swami Shivananda. They were framed by the Master in the early days when he resided at the Shwag ashram. These form the foundation of spiritual sadhana as initiated by him. On this side, Swami Shivananda's Universal Prayer. On the final side are found the cardinal doctrines of each of the major religions of the world. The Yoga Vedanta, Forest Academy Press. Dissemination of knowledge was very dear to the heart of Swami Shivananda. The printing press began in September 1951 with an extremely simple dreidel machine. The demand for his books grew, and the machine was no longer adequate. Equipment was donated to increase production for the Master's best-selling titles. Mechanical composition machines, binding machines, machines to cut the printed page, and of course, the printing press itself. Swami Dayanandaji is the architect and moving spirit behind the printing press. He is an unassuming, noble soul. With the other publication managers, the titles are taken from the drawing board to the finished product. The Publication League is the area in the ashram where the printed books are available for sale. In his lifetime, Shivananda wrote over 300 books, ranging on a wide variety of subjects: yoga, Vedanta, religion, education, health, and meditation. Mr. Michael receives a catalog. He selects a few of the master's books to take home with him. He requests sadhana, a book listing all the spiritual practices as prescribed by Shivananda. Bliss Divine, the life story of many great saints, sages, and avatars. A book entitled All About Hinduism. And the Yoga Samhita. Nearby, workers are kept busy wrapping books. These are to fill the numerous domestic and foreign orders. These publications are shipped all over the world. Here, a small storeroom of Shivananda's books. There are many such storerooms scattered across the ashram grounds. Mr. Michael's books are wrapped and offered to him free of charge as a gift of Master Shivananda. After a long day, Katakayam Swami escorts Mr. Michael back to his room in the new apartment complex. The architecture is extremely modern. The apartment itself is equipped with its own kitchen. They sit to discuss what they will do in the morning. The next day, they attend the early morning meditation session. It is conducted by the president of the Divine Life Society, Swami Chidanandaji Maharaj. Swami Chidananda is about to conclude the early morning session with prayers for the welfare of all beings.
May all beings in this universe attain happiness. From unrealities lead us into the eternal reality. From the darkness of spiritual ignorance lead us into the light of divine wisdom. From death and mortality of earth consciousness lead us into immortality and everlasting life in the spirit. Peace. Peace. Peace unto all beings. The peace of God be with you all. May divine peace fill your hearts. May His joy ever dwell in your mind. May His light illumine your inner being. May His grace enfold you, and may His love take you by your hand and guide you towards blessedness. God bless you all. Master Shivananda's spiritual benedictions be upon you all. Hari Om Tat Sat. Satchidananda Bhagavan ki jai, Sadgurudeva ki jai, Mahi ki jai. God bless you.
The early morning meditation session has run late. It is now 6:45, and they must hurry if they are to arrive at the peace chanting before it concludes. In this hall, the Vedas are worshipped daily. The Vedas are the holy book of the Hindus, similar to the Western world's Bible. In early times, the Vedas were taught from master to disciple by oral transmission. Later on, these teachings were glorified in book form. There are 4 Vedas. Each section is again divided into 4: the Samhitas, the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, and the Upanishads. The Upanishads contain the highest wisdom, including instructions regarding the meditation necessary to obtain this wisdom. After leaving the prayer hall, they go to the simple home of Swami Vidyananda, one of the senior monks of the ashram, and a resident for some 30 years. They discover that his prayer session is still in progress, and they enter. Every morning, he recites Vedic hymns and sings bhajans to the accompaniment of his veena. Although this is part of a personal sadhana, he happily permits visitors to join in the recitation and singing. He also holds an afternoon study class in Vedantic texts. He ascribes all his great learnedness and talents to the grace of the goddess Saraswati and to the grace of his master, Swami Shivananda Saraswati. He did, in fact, learn the skills of the veena, a most difficult and subtle instrument, in a mere 12 days. the office of the Secretary of the Divine Life Society, Swami Krishnananda. A unique opportunity at the Sivananda ashram in the late morning and forenoon is darshan with Swami Krishnanandaji. An Advaita Vedantan to the core, he is the master of nearly every system of Indian thought and Western philosophy. He is a great advocate of the unity of religions, true to the teaching of his master, Swami Shivananda. People, especially religious priests and philosophers, come to him from every part of the world to have their doubts and questions clarified, which he does with homely analogies and depth of insight born of personal experiences. He is also an able administrator, holding the position of General Secretary of this Divine Life Society for nearly 3 decades, since 1957. An inquiry is made as to whether Swami Krishnanandaji has a message for Mr. Michael.
Swamiji may give a message to Michael ji. He is very eager to have some message from Swamiji.
Having taken birth in this world, having come for whatever reason God might have sent us here, it is our duty to do all that is necessary within our effort, knowledge and capacity. To go back to that source from where we have been sent and from where we have come. All that we do in this world, whatever be our work, whatever be the duty that we do or vocation we are engaged in, every blessed thing from the littlest thing to the biggest thing is an arduous, concentrated, whole-souled preparation for that great journey, return journey to that great parent of all creation. And this is called religion, this is called spirituality, this is called yoga, this is called duty, and this is finally the meaning of it. This is a short message and long message for you and for everybody. Nagar mein Sagar. And after Vijayanath said Swamiji and Pushpa and Chandranath.
After having darshan and a message from Swami Krishnanandaji, they humbly take their leave.
I don't think Christ ever said I do. It is all done by
At 11 and 11:30, lunch is available in the ashram dining hall. In addition to feeding its own residents, the ashram also distributes food, both to beggars and sadhus, on the roadside. After finishing lunch at the dining hall, hands are washed. While monkeys play in the sun, ashramites prepare to return to their duties, working in the selfless spirit of karma yoga. Activities are numerous. Dairy cows must be tended and cared for in order to produce the all-important milk and yogurt. The Sivananda Ayurvedic Pharmaceutical Works. Here, Ayurvedic products are manufactured, packaged, and ready to be shipped throughout the world. Here is but a small portion of the daily mail to be received by the ashram. The greatest percentage of mail is addressed either to Swami Chidananda or Swami Krishnananda. Each have their own secretary to help with the mail. Spiritual guidance and advice in personal problems to aspirants by post is an important avenue for dissemination of knowledge and toward that end, there are over 20 typewriters at various departments of the ashram. In the magazine department, workers ready wrappers and labels for the journals of the Divine Life Society. The journals themselves contain articles by Swami Shivananda and others, as well as a complete schedule of the events of the society. Currently, 2 journals are published: The Divine Life in English and Yoga Vedanta in Hindi. All the outgoing mail and parcels are channeled through this office. Accounts are carefully and diligently kept, as postage varies depending on destination, size, and weight of each item. When Shivananda first came from Shwag Ashram in 1934, he lived in this tiny room. When he shifted his residence to a small cottage on the Ganges bank, this became the Shivananda Charitable Dispensary. In 1950, the structure was built onto, and it was turned into a full-fledged hospital, henceforward known as the Shivananda Charitable Hospital. It is like most hospitals in most respects, except one. It does not exist for profit, but only to help the sick and suffering. A person must first register at the front desk. He gives the required information, is given a number, and is asked to take a seat. Inside, doctors are busy diagnosing patients. In the clinical laboratory, a lab technician takes a slide to examine for the presence of malaria parasites in this child. Once a diagnosis has been established, medicines are prescribed. Those who cannot afford their prescriptions receive them free. There is a full-fledged operation theater where surgery is performed. In this particular case, an orthopedic surgeon operates to perform a tendon transplant on a victim of leprosy. There is also an eye hospital where eye operations may be performed. This male ward has approximately 12 beds. Beds are both donated and maintained through the generosity of others. After concluding the hospital tour, they come to the Diamond Jubilee Hall, the site where Swami Shivananda chose to conduct the daily office business. Each day, as he arrived, many would be waiting eagerly for his blessings. Some would be waiting to have their problems solved by him. The manager of the printing press might appear with a newly printed book, a cashier with a demand list, a publication manager with book packets for dispatch, a doctor seeking the master's medical knowledge or medical advice. He would attend to them all simultaneously, making each one feel he was his and his alone, each one feeling he was the master's own special ally. On the morning of the 21st of 1963, the master walked out of his office, and standing in this spot, announced to his devotees an aerial plane from Brahmi Shivananda. In this kutir, Shivananda would spend the greater part of the day, immersed in the bliss and ananda of the self. The kutir became known as the Ananda Kutir, or bliss abode. This dwelling is permeated with a joyous yet peaceful atmosphere. It is no wonder, then, that yogis come to practice meditation here and easily lose themselves in the bliss that pervades the abode. In a corner of the kutir is a small altar. Here he would sit and do worship of Lord Krishna. To the left of this altar and through this hallway is the window through which he would look out and see the river Ganga. He would descend to the river using these stairs. Having reached the bottom of the platform, his first action was to feed the fish living in the river. He then entered the river Ganga himself. After entering the water, he would prepare to dip himself 3 times, each time saying a special prayer. The first, for the peace of departed souls. The second, for the peace and happiness of all living beings everywhere. And the third, for his own salvation. During the summer months, he would use the platform for satsanga. He would often sit here for his own meditation, saying, "Ganga has taught me the secret of the Upanishads." Back inside the Ananda Kutir, they visit the writing table of Swami Shivananda. It was sitting at this chair that the master wrote most of his works. In the last days, he could not manage to sit very well. He continued with his projects, nonetheless, by dictating to an assistant. On June 24th, 1963, he dictated, "Happiness comes when the individual merges in God." After waiting for a while, the assistant asked for further dictation. Shivananda replied, "Enough." In a few days, on this bed, in this kutir, the master entered Mahasamadhi, the final merging in the non-dual. As part of the centenary, a Shivananda memorial arch will be erected at the entrance of the ashram. On this day, monks and others arrive at the ashram. They have come, many from distant places, to celebrate the anniversary of Swami Shivananda's Mahasamadhi. This is the holy Mahasamadhi shrine of Swami Shivananda. The shrine flies the red sannyasa flag, symbolizing the blazing fire of renunciation. Under the flag is the crest of the Divine Life Society, symbolizing the 4 great paths to God realization: Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, also represented by serve, love, meditate, realize. Om, the highest mantra. All mantras, all sounds, are contained in it. The sacred altar of Swami Shivananda Maharaj. Beneath it is laid his Samadhisthana, has become a place of pilgrimage to thousands of his disciples and devotees who visit the ashram every year. They stay here for short or long durations, having once re-established themselves firmly on the spiritual path. One of the marvels of the life of Swami Shivananda is that he saw the fulfillment of his mission in his own lifetime, and now, with his living presence here, both visible and invisible, he guides the activities of his mission through a band of dedicated sannyasins and sadhaks under the presidentship of Swami Chidananda. The light of Shivananda is inextinguishable. Now that the gossamer cage is broken, the beloved is ever free to dance in our hearts.